Hello and welcome to yet another video. It's Besto here again, and in this video I'll quickly show you how to fix permission denied public key, and also I'll show you how to log in into your web servers from different sandboxes. So assuming I created my SSH key in a particular sandbox and I want to use a different sandbox to log into my web server, and I try to log in using the command SSH, my username, and then my IP address. Yeah, when I try to log in, it says right here that permission denied. Okay, so you can see that I have issues trying to log in. So the first thing I would like to show you is to set the right permission for your SSH directories. So how do we set the right permissions for the SSH directory? The first thing you need to know that we have three categories of users in Linux. And the first category of user is called the owner. We have others, and then you need to know that each of these categories has three set of permissions you can give to them. And we say they can have read, they can have write, they can have execute. So each category of these users can have permissions to either read into a file, write into it, or allowed to execute a file. So we said when you have permission as the owner to read a file, you have 4 points. When you have the right to write into a file, you have 2 points for that. And then when you're able to execute, you have 1 point. So you can see right here that each of this group has the same points for being able to read, write, or execute. All right, so when you have permission as the owner to read, write, and execute, that should be 4 plus 2 plus 1, so you have 7 points for that. And when you have permissions to read and write for a particular group, you have 7 points for that. So you can have 7 point maximum. Now let's get to see how we can set the right permissions for our SSH. Because SSH is a hidden directory and it's advisable to make it private so that only the owner can have access to read, write, and execute. We said we should give permissions for him to be able to read. You can have the right to write, permissions to write, that should be 2 points. And if you have permission to execute, that's 1 point. And because everyone else is not supposed to have access to this file, it's supposed to be hidden. We said 0 for every other person in the group and 0 for permissions to write, and we have 0 for that, so everybody gets a 0 because you don't have access to be able to read or write into that file. So at the end of this you have 4 plus 2 and 1, so you can have 7 and 0 and 0, and so you have 700 for the SSH directory. Alright, let's go into the public file and see what permission it has. So your public file would contain your public key, and as the name implies, it's supposed to be public. So you as the owner, you are allowed to read that. So when you're allowed to read that file, you have 4 points to do that. You are allowed to write into that file, you have 2 points to do that. And then we said let's set the execution permission to 0. And for others in the group, for the category of group, we said we want them to be able to just read into the file. You can edit it, you can do anything. So you have 4 points for that, and you get 0 for not being able to write and 0 for not being able to execute. Now for others, the categories of others, what we need to do is, okay, allow them to be able to read into the file, so they get 4 points to that. They can write into this file, so no point, and they can execute this file, so no point for that. So at the end of this, you have 4 plus 2, that's 6, and you have 4 points here, and you have 4 points here. So for your public key, you should set the permission to 644. So now let's get to see what permission our private key should have. Because this is supposed to be a private key, we wouldn't want other people to be able to access it. So we said the owner, in this category, the owner should be able to read into the file, is allowed to write into it, and execution permission is 0. So everyone else, because this is private, everyone else stay out of it. So we set permissions for that to be able to read, write, and execute. Everything should be 0. So at the end of this, you get a 6, and you get 0, and you get 0 for group and others. So in summary, your SSH directory is supposed to have permissions for at 700. Your public key should be 644, and your private key should have permission at 600. So I believe you understand why it's like that. So let's get in and do a little practice. So again, when I try to access my server, my username and my IP address, it keeps saying permission denied public key. Let's see how we can fix this. Okay, what I'll do is just go into the root directory. Yeah, because I want to keep things private. Go into the root directory, and I'm going to ls if there's any SSH directory there, I'll just rename it or just move it. So if there's any SSH directory there, I'll just rename it. So let me say mv .ssh. Yeah, instead of deleting it, just rename it, and I'll call it old SSH. All right. So what I need to do is to make a new SSH directory, and to do that, I'll just make a directory and call it hidden SSH. Okay. So when I ls -a, you see that I have a directory called .ssh here. All right. What I'll do is that I'll just set the right permissions for that, and to do that, let me use sudo privileges to do that. Sudo chmod, change the mode, and we said our SSH directory is supposed to have 700 permissions, so we said 700.ssh. Okay, when I make a long list of my files to see the permissions for them, you can see right here that the directory.ssh has these permissions. So D represents directory. So in this category of owner, we have 3 permissions for that. So we have the read, the write, and execute. And when you go to the group, there is no permissions to read, no permission to write, or no permission to execute. And others too don't have the right to read, write, or execute. So all right, let me clear my screen. So I'll just go into cd into the hidden SSH directory, and I'll now create some files here. So the file is going to contain my public key and my private key. So wherever I've saved my private key, I'll just go get it and come back and just insert it. All right. So I would like to save my private key in a file called school. So whatever file you prefer using, it's left for you. So I'll just touch that file. I'll save it in school, and I want my public key to be saved as school.pub. Okay, when I ls discover that I have 2 files. Now let's see the permissions for those files. So you can see right here that my school file has, you can see right here that because this is a file, there's a hyphen there, and the owner of this file has permissions to read, to write, and no permission to execute. And others in the group has no permission, or just permissions to read, no permission to write or execute. And others have permissions to read, write, no permissions to write, and no permission to execute. And also because of my public file called school.pub, The permission here is because this is a file, and then the user has permissions to read, write, no permission to execute. Others, sorry, group, they have permissions to read, no permission to write or execute. And then others have no permission, they have permissions to read, no permission to write, and no permission to execute. So we're just going to copy our the content of our private key and put it in the file called school. So I'll just do that in a moment. So I'll just use Vim to write into that file. So I'll just paste my private key here. All right, and I'll save that. And because I said the permissions for your private key should be 600, so I'll just use sudo privileges to do that. So sudo chmod, change the mode. 600 for the school file, and there you go. When you ls minus a, discover that minus la, sorry, you discover that the right permission has been set for the school file, so only the user can be able to read and write it. Everyone else has no permission to do anything with the file. All right, let's carry out the same steps for the school, your public key too. Okay, just clear my screen, and I'll vi into school.pub, my public key. So I'll just go right there and insert it, and there you can see my public's key. I'll save that and also ensure that I set the right permission for it. So to do that, use super privileges to do that. Chmod, change the mode, and we said this is supposed to be 644 for this public key. Okay, so your public keys is expected to have those permissions. When you ls minus la, and you see that you've set the right permissions for your public key. This is just an ordinary file. The user has the right to read, write, and does not have the right to execute. Everyone in the group has the right to read, no right to write or execute, and others, they have only the right to read, no right to write, or no right to execute. I'll just go back home, and when I list, I discover I have some files. So whatever directory or whatever repository you want to put your file, what I would do here is that, because I'm going to be writing a series of commands to be able to allow you logging into your server successfully, I'm just going to create a file for it and just call it web01. So I'll just vi web01, use Vim to do that. So I'll just go back home, and I'll just create a file and write some commands in it, since I'm going to be using that to be logging into my server. So to do that, I'll just use v and maybe call the name of the file as web01, and in it I'm just going to use another means of authenticating into my server. To do that, I'll just do eval dollar and put that. So I need to come in as an SSH agent. You can use this to log into your servers too. Next thing I need to do is to specify where my public key is located. So I can say SSH add, because my key was in the root, and in the hidden directory SSH, and the name of the file was school. So just specify where your private key is located, not necessarily school, but whatever name you have saved it with. So it's going to be Ubuntu, my username at my IP address. So I'll just paste my IP address there and save this file. And when I list, you discover that my file is there. Okay, here is it. Alright, I need to make this file executable so that I can be able to run it. So I'll just change the mode and allow our users to be able to execute this file, and the name of the file is web01. Okay, when I list, you discover that my file is now executable. What I need to do is just to run it, and it will log me in. And it asks for my passphrase. If you have a passphrase, you can just put in that passphrase. I just go right there and put my passphrase, and you can see right here that I'm logged in into my server. So these are just the steps you can take to solve your permission deny issues. I hope this video helps. If you're new to the channel, you can like and subscribe so that you get notified whenever I post and make another video like this. So you can repeat the same steps or processes when you get a new sandbox or when you open a new terminal to carry out your project. I hope this helps fix your permission deny public key issues. Thank you for your time. If this video was helpful to you, you can leave a comment in the comment section. I hope this helped.